remember just lying on the floor of the hotel room, literally thinking that I would either die there or like be put into a mental institute in Canada. I used to be a workaholic. I would work as much as I possibly could. I'd be working 24/7, and I would always be trying to build up these businesses, and I would put everything that I had into them. And during those years, I went through a lot of burnouts, and I had very much ignored them. I had this mentality, and I think that many people do, is that I thought, I wasn't supposed to show any signs of weakness, that I had to kind of just get through this to become successful. So I kind of just always kept on going no matter what the warning signs were. I remember being in a lot of pain. And physically, yeah. And that was the beginning of, the most difficult period of my life, where for the next, I would say 6 or 7 months, I literally thought that I was just dying. I didn't realize that the problem was a mental problem. I still believe that this was something that was physically. A lot of physical problems that we go through, whether that be back pain, headaches, stomach aches, all these kind of different things, they often have some connection with stress and anxiety. I think both the key to success in business, and I think also kind of the key to happiness in life, is knowing who you are, how you function, what you're good at and what you're bad at, and kind of knowing what you want to get out of life. Having a life outside of business has also put things like that in perspective. So I think I'm able to enjoy the success that I get better if I have somebody else to enjoy it with.
Do you think that this having life outside of business for yourself and celebrating your milestones, focusing on your building relationships with your family, makes you less ambitious as the business owner and founder?
I'm not sure. It's just one of those things that I haven't kind of figured out yet. But I know that I want to achieve success in business, but I also want to achieve success in my personal life. In my opinion, the majority of founders and entrepreneurs and people that are working in kind of these high responsibility jobs, I think the majority of them actually have or will have at some point during their career some kind of mental illness.
Looking for smart stats about leadership and personal development? Then sorry, this show is not for you. On The Genius Leadership, we share relatable stories of real people and give you practical tools for personal and professional development so that you can start implementing them right away. I'm your host, Anna Lieben, mindshifter, helping leaders get from reacting to creating. And Genius Leadership is about elevating humanity, one person at a time. Let's go.
Haukur, warmest welcome to the Genius Leadership podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I don't know why I haven't asked you for an interview before, because you have such an interesting story and you've done so much. You have so much experience. Genius Leaders, I'm really sorry for not bringing you earlier.
I'm just happy to be here now. Thank you.
So let's just start with, who are you? And to those of my listeners who don't know you, what do you want them to understand about your background?
I'm very passionate about entrepreneurship. I've been a founder for over 20 years now, and I've had various types of businesses. In the last few years, I've been more focused on kind of like startups and more tax side of things. But before that, I've been investing in real estate. I had a service company, had some websites, stock exchange kind of game that we were selling to the universities. That was part of the education there. I've done quite a lot of different stuff. And I think it probably started quite early, but it really took me a long time to realize where I was heading. Like very early on, I would buy and sell cars to try to make some money. I would kind of build websites for people. I would do, kind of try to find some way of kind of building my own job, like doing or working for myself. I think very early on, I was very curious about that, being able to kind of control my own life, I guess.
Why was that interesting for you?
That's a good question. I think, at least if you would have asked me a few years ago, I think it would have been difficult for me to maybe guess what the reason was. But I think now that I've gone through this process of kind of, and I'll probably talk about it a little bit later, but I've gone through bad burnouts and mental breakdown, and I had to work a lot on myself, and I worked with a psychiatrist where I kind of went through a lot of stuff that I went through. And I think one of the key factors in who I am right now is the fact that I think when I was about 13 or 14 years old, my father passed away. And I think that might have had a big impact on me. Maybe the fact that I wanted to build my own business was something to do with the fact that I wanted more control, being able to kind of get control better over my life since I couldn't control some things. But it also was the fact that he passed away when I was very early on. And I think the reason, for example, why I became very obsessed with businesses and I really became a workaholic was the fact that I kind of was always trying to prove myself to him. So I think that it had it was just one of many reasons, I guess. It wasn't just that. But it's kind of funny as you kind of get a little bit older and you kind of go through this process of kind of analyzing all the decisions you made in your life and figuring out why you are where you are. I think it's often quite interesting that you make these decisions without actually realizing them. Like there are kind of reasons for them, but you don't realize them until much later on.
Do you think we actually need to dig into all that, understanding why behind our actions? What kind of value does it bring?
Well, I think both the key to success in business and I think also kind of the key to happiness in life is knowing who you are, how you function, what you're good at and what you're bad at, and kind of knowing what you want to get out of life. And I think that if you don't know that, it's going to be difficult to build a business that creates value for you. And it's going to be difficult for you to find happiness if you don't know what makes you happy. So I think actually knowing yourself is the most important thing you can do in life. But at the same time, I think it's one of those things that very few people actually put the time into doing, because I think most people just don't know who they are and what they're going to get out of life.
Why do you think we're not putting time and effort into that?
That's a good question. I think we often get just preoccupied with the day-to-day life. I think we kind of just start following the path that we think we're supposed to be walking. We start going to school and getting a job. And it's not actually very often that parents or teachers actually challenge us to think about these things. Mm. So I think it's one of those things that just for some reason isn't focused on very much in society.
So you started doing that work, understanding or trying to understand who you are, learning about how you function. Was it related to one of the burnouts or?
Well, I've always been very curious. I've always been I've always spent a lot of time thinking about life and the meaning of life. And when I was younger, I would spend endless amounts of time thinking about why we exist and all that stuff. So I've always had that within me. But I think actually when I went through, like my mental breakdown, I became very sick and I had to spend a lot of time kind of working through that. And one of the most valuable things there was that I went through this process of sitting down with a psychiatrist and going through all these kind of figuring really out how I ended up where I ended up. And I think that was very valuable to me. And I think it's definitely something that everybody should try to figure out is just why are they doing what they're doing and how can we kind of live a better life, I think.
Was it your decision to reach out to a psychiatrist or were you sent there by the healthcare system?
Maybe I think it would be good to kind of just tell a little bit about the story about how it kind of, or what happened to me. So like I said, I've been in business for 20 plus years. And I used to be a workaholic. I would work as much as I possibly could. I would be working 24/7, and I would always be trying to build up these businesses, and I would put everything that I had into them. And during those years, I went through a lot of burnouts, and I've started to kind of categorize the burnouts, because you have small burnouts, medium-sized burnouts, and large burnouts. It's like, for me, it's like usually I kind of categorize them depending on how much time I need to recover. So you can get small burnouts where you just need like a day or two just away from everything and just close yourself off just to kind of recharge your batteries and get back out there. Then there could be like weeks, or it could be months. And in the worst cases, it can be years. And in those cases, I'm not really sure if I should call it a burnout or if it's just basically a mental breakdown, because it just kind of ruins everything. It's just a very terrible experience to go through. So I had gone through all these kind of different categories of burnouts over the years, and I had very much ignored them. I had, like, my body was constantly saying, like, you have to slow down, and it was forcing me to take a couple of days or even weeks off just to kind of recover from all this kind of intensive work.
I'll pause you here. How was it manifesting in your body? Was it pain? Was it were you getting sick easily?
Well,
what was going on?
In the early stages, it's actually more the energy just kind of leaves you. Like, you don't have energy for even the most basic things. And that was like in the early stages, that was the first signs of problems. It's just that I would not, like, there would be days where I just wouldn't have the energy to face the world, basically. So I would kind of just need to, close myself off from the world and kind of recharge, and then I would get back out there. But I think later on, there were different signs that were warning signs. I remember getting dizzy, like getting these periods where I become very dizzy. And I remember, like, I did a talk at an event one time, and like the whole room was just like turning around, and I had to kind of hold on to the table in front of me while I was talking. But I would like finish everything that I was supposed to do. I would never let anything like this stop me. And I had this mentality, and I think that many people do, is that I thought, I wasn't supposed to show any signs of weakness, that I had to kind of just get through this to become successful. So I kind of just always kept on going, no matter what the warning signs were. Now, as this kind of started getting worse, I think burnouts and mental illness often comes out in very physical ways. So I think it depends on people, and it's quite different how it manifests. But for me, it was stomach aches, and especially when I went through the mental kind of the main point of the mental breakdown. So I was kind of been under a lot of pressure for a long time, but then I come to this point where it kind of all kind of climaxes. So it's like, there's so many different things going on in my life at the same point. And I had kind of gotten used to the pressure of the business side. But at the same time, in the business side, like, I was having problems with my business. I was having to lay people off. I was in a position where I might actually have to close down the business. On my personal side, there were illnesses in my family. My best friend passed away. So there was just like a lot of things kind of going on at the same time. And I remember I was at a conference in Edmonton in Canada. I had just, like, when I got on the plane to fly out there, I had just gotten the phone call that my best friend had just passed away. So it was like a very intense moment, and I couldn't really work through it in the airplane with, like, hundreds of people around me. So I had to kind of bottle it up, and I had to go to this conference, and right away then everything starts kind of going. And I had to kind of do my talk and, these people, and pretend to be happy. But I remember in the evening when I got back to the hotel, they kind of all hit me full force. And I remember just lying on the floor of the hotel room, literally thinking that I would either die there or like be put into a mental institute in Canada and just like, I don't know, I thought I was literally broken. And I remember being in a lot of pain. And physically, yeah. And that was the beginning of, the most difficult period of my life, where for the next, I would say 6 or 7 months, I literally thought that I was just dying, or thought I was going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? I thought I would never recover properly. I thought that this was just the end of who I used to be. And I would lay in bed and I would have these terrible stomach aches. And for me at that point, I didn't realize that the problem was a mental problem. I still believed that this was something that was physically, like I went to all these doctors and I said, I'm having problems with my stomach, and I did all these exams and everything, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me. And I remember it took me, many, many months before somebody actually kind of told me, or maybe somebody had told me before, but I hadn't kind of processed, but somebody told me like, this might be mental, like this might be, stress or anxiety or something like that. And it was so weird that I hadn't figured that out before that.
How did you react when it finally landed, that message that someone told you and you were like, stressed? I'm not stressed, or like stress can manifest in the stomachache. What was going on with you then?
I think there was a bit of a conflict within myself, because I would have actually been at that point more comfortable with it being something physical than it being something mental, because at that point still I felt like if it was mental, that meant that I wasn't strong enough, or I wasn't good enough. And what's interesting also is that at that point I'd been working in the entrepreneurial world for a long time and had a lot of friends that were founders, but I really hadn't heard of this happening to anyone else. Like at that point, I thought I was the only weak one, that I was like the loser. So because I didn't know at that point how actually common this is, I think I was even harder on myself. And I remember actually in the beginning, after having been in this situation for a few weeks, I wasn't kind of willing to be such a loser, and I kind of just even though I wasn't feeling really well, I was kind of like I just drank like juices for like 10 days. I didn't eat anything, and I started like trying to exercise, and I kind of went out there and I was going to do some investments. So I did some offers on some rental properties, and I was really going to make sure that I wasn't going to end up as a loser, basically. That was the word that I had kind of in my mind, I guess. I wanted to make sure that I would kind of just get out of this funk or whatever this was. But that actually just made things worse. Like the key to all of this was when I allowed myself to kind of basically just allowed myself to rest and give myself a little bit of a leeway, where I would kind of said to myself, actually, it's okay to be sick. You've gone through a lot. And I think actually like my big breakthrough moment was when I went to a psychiatrist, and I did this basically when I realized that this was something mental. I decided to do it properly. So I started meditating. I started, going out for walks. I started eating healthy and tried to do everything that I could to fix this. And one of those things was going to a psychiatrist. And I remember in the first time I met with him. And by the way, actually a good point here is that this was the third psychiatrist that I met with.
I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, because it took me a long time to find somebody that I could kind of relate to. And I think it's kind of, at least here in Iceland, it's expensive to go to psychiatrists. And you actually have to book a meeting with them and pay for that. And then afterwards you might be, they don't get me. So I had gone to 2 psychiatrists before. They didn't really, I wasn't able to bond with them. And so this is the third one I go to. And I remember I sit down with him and I remember I started off by telling him the story, like everything that I got gone through, and I went to all the details and everything. And I remember after I finished telling me this, he's silent for a while, and he just looks at me and he goes like, I do this for a living, listening to people, but I'm literally exhausted listening to you. So it's okay for you to be exhausted too. So he just gave me the okay for, like he kind of told me it's okay for me to be in the situation now. It's normal compared to everything that I had gone through up to that point. And I think just hearing that from somebody who I felt knew what he was talking about and made the rest of the process much easier. Even though it was a lot of difficult work ahead. I mean, it literally took me 3 years to work out of this work kind of back to the place where I was before, getting back to the place where I felt like myself again. So it took me 3 years of kind of hard work to get back there. But hearing that from him was the kind of the first real step towards getting better.
I just noted now, you mentioned that when you realized that it might be something mental, not physical, for you as the problem, you started doing all the right things, quote unquote. And you mentioned meditation. And I'm very curious, how did you meditate? Because from all I hear, you were like this go person. You really needed to like have the movement and like accomplishments in your life and so on. So what kind of meditation was it? Because I know that for a lot of clients of mine, just sitting down is impossible. Yeah. And they want to slap me in my face when I suggest that. So what was your way into meditation?
I think I probably tried a few different ways, but I found that guided meditation for me worked best. I remember also, so I would be using these apps like Headspace and Calm, and there was one more that I used, I can't remember the name now. But it was really good because I would have all the meditation kind of on my phone, so I could just kind of put on my headset, and there would be, I think it was 2 ways that worked well for me. There were some like walking meditations where I could actually be walking and go through meditation during that. But then also I would just do it at the end of, in the evenings, I would do meditation before going to sleep. For me, and by the way, like, I think like anxiety was probably the biggest kind of thing that I had to work through. I don't know, I probably was a little bit of an anxious person before all of this, but at least afterwards, anxiety was a very strong emotion for me, and I had to put a lot of effort into getting control over it. And it would usually manifest itself in the evenings. So I would be able to often function well in the mornings and during the day. But once I would lay down in the evenings, it was going to just flood over me, and I would become so anxious. It was so difficult. So,
and was it again physical, or was it about the thoughts? What was going on?
It was. Well, I perceived it as being very much physical. It was still my stomach, and I would have these cramps in my stomach, and I feel terrible. And so I would lay down in the evenings, and I would try to do meditation. And after a while, I don't know how long it was, maybe a couple of weeks or something, I started feeling that when I was doing the meditation, it would kind of lessen the pressure in my body. So I felt like my stomach kind of softening up a little bit. And I remember, especially after having done one meditation where I actually kind of experienced a kind of like a blissful moment. I didn't get them very often, but had just going through it, like it happened a few times where I did meditation, where I just feel so good afterwards or during. And I remember that it was just such a nice feeling when I felt that kind of cramp in my stomach and just went away a little bit, kind of pent up pressure in my body kind of just loosened up. And still to this day, I realized that stress and anxiety, at least for me, really manifests itself physically in my stomach, and manifests as pressure and kind of like stiffening up of the body. And I remember also, a few years back, I had, after all this mental breakdown, I had some back problems. And I realized that the reason I had back problems was actually because of the stress and anxiety, because it was, putting pressure on my stomach, which actually affected my back. And it was like a lot of physical problems that we go through, whether that be back pain, headaches, stomach aches, all these kind of different things. They often have some connection with stress and anxiety. And I think it's difficult for us to connect the two things. And it was difficult for me at that point, but actually now, after having been through it, it's kind of easy for me to realize often when I go through some physical difficulties that maybe they're kind of related to my mental situation rather than the physical. And it's interesting that during that 3-year period where I was kind of getting back on track or kind of becoming myself again and kind of recovering from this, my psychiatrist recommended I don't do any drugs or any kind of anxiety pills or anything like that. He wanted me to work through it by myself. I'm not sure if that was the right call or not. In a lot of ways, it might have been easier for me to lessen the pressure a little bit with something like that. But a few years later, I did try, when I was, had recovered from this, but there was still some just underlying anxiety. I did try going on anxiety pills. And I remember it was kind of interesting because I just did it for 5 days and then I decided not to do it anymore because I felt like it slowed me down a little bit too much. And at that point, I was building my business and I didn't feel like I needed it that much. But what's interesting is that when I tried doing anxiety medicine and taking those pills, I actually realized exactly where the anxiety was manifesting. So there were certain feelings where I'd feel tired or sore in the body or stuff like that. But for those 5 days when I was on the pills, that went away. So I was able in my mind to connect, okay, so these feelings that I'm feeling are actually not just physical, they actually come from the mental side of things. So when I was able to do that, I actually got better control over my anxiety. I kind of learned better how I function. So even though I just did the medication for like 5 days, which usually would not make a big difference, but I was just able to, in my mind, kind of draw out exactly what kind of feelings were actually directly related to the anxiety and stress, which was going to help me process it and has up to this day helped me kind of keep my anxiety and stress in check.
So you got more aware of the symptoms.
More aware of the symptoms and more aware of how I function as an individual. And I think it's also interesting. And I've actually become fascinated with this because I talk to a lot of founders and business people. And I enjoy having this conversation with them. And I realize that people they're so different. And some people are more, I really don't want to use the word sensitive, but some people are more likely to experience these things than others. I would say that, in my opinion, the majority of founders and entrepreneurs and people that are working in kind of these high responsibility jobs, I think the majority of them actually have or will have at some point during their career some kind of mental illness. And this can be anxiety, this can be stress, this could be depression. It can kind of come out in all these different ways, but I think the majority of them do. Now, I've talked to a few people that are actually able to handle these situations quite well, and I've been trying to figure out what they're doing that works. And there's 2 things in particular that I've noticed about them that I'm trying to kind of copy now so that I can continue being successful at what I do. And one of them is the fact that they are able to detach themselves from a business when they're not working on the business. This is something that I have had problems with in the past. The other thing is that they surround themselves with good people that they can trust and rely on. So that lessens the pressure on them because they have people that are working with it. They can kind of support them.
So it's specifically in the team. So the team are people who they trust, so that it's easier for them to delegate and control and actually offload themselves.
Yeah, so they have co-founders or employees that they trust well enough that they can kind of delegate and kind of put the pressure, the responsibility on them instead.
So with the first part, with the detachment, how does it manifest for you, or did manifest for you when you didn't manage with that, when you struggled with associating yourself too much with a business? And then the next question will be about what you observe in those founders. How do they do it with detaching?
Yeah. So for me, I think my idea of self-worth, or like who I was directly connected with what I was working on. Like if I were working on a specific business, there would be no line between me and the business. The business was literally me. Like I would put everything I had, all my energy, all my money, everything that I had into the business. I was completely obsessed with it. And I didn't really look at the business as being a business. It was just part of who I was. It was just an expansion of who I was. So when you get into problems with a business, when you have such an unhealthy relationship with a business, then it affects you quite strongly. Now, nowadays, I have to be more conscious about it, and I have to be more aware that I am not my business, and I have to make sure that if my business fails, that it does not have any impact on who I am or how I perceive myself. It's not an easy thing to do. It sounds easy, but it's like, and I'm not sure how I do it in particular, but one of the things is just the fact that I try to have a life outside of my business. And now also I have a family. So I have 2 kids, 2 boys, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. And they kind of force me to detach. So after work and until they go to sleep, like that's family time. So at least during that time, I don't really have even the possibility to think about my job or my business, because I'm just kind of completely, they're both very energetic. So they kind of take all my focus, which is a good thing, I guess. But I guess also now that I have a family and kind of a life outside of my business, I think that's made me a little bit healthier, giving me a healthier perspective on my business.
I want to pause on that, Haukur, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially younger people, they're like, okay, I'll actually just focus full time on my business right now, and I'll work on creating a family later on. What I'm hearing here is actually creating a family can be helpful for the business success, because you you design your life so that you actually have some breaks, which make you more sustainable and a better performer founder in a way, if you do focus on that relationship for at least a couple of hours a day.
It's a good question. I'm not sure how to answer it, because to tell you the truth is that if you want to be super successful in your business, and that is supposed to be your priority, then maybe having family isn't the right thing, because you want to be able to focus on them as well. But it's difficult to do that if you're completely obsessed with your business. But at the same time, if you want to be happy in life and you perceive family as something that you want to have, then I think then you should definitely do it. I think I'm just one, because I've also thought about this, that a lot of the most kind of successful business people that I've looked up to, not all of them are really good parents or family members. Like they're so obsessed with their jobs. So I think if you want to be Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, it's going to be difficult for you to put the time and effort into your family. But if you want to be happy in life, if you want to find fulfillment, then I think you have to balance these things out.
What is happiness to you?
What is happiness to me? That's such a big question.
Well, you just referred to it a couple of times, and from this example sounded like Jobs was not and Musk is not happy because they're not putting time and doing a good job with their relationships.
I think a lot of the business people that I look up to might not always have a very healthy perspective on work. So for me, happiness is being able to do what I enjoy doing, but at the same time, being able to share that with people around me.
Why is sharing important to you?
I think it gives you the chance to consciously enjoy what you're doing, because if you, like I was before, if you only focuses on work, if you're completely obsessed about it, it didn't really matter what I would be able to achieve. I would never be happy about it, because I would always have the next thing to chase. And I remember talking to a lot of people at that point that, from my perspective, were so successful. And when I talked to them, they were still chasing, the next goal. And I think, at least for me now, having a life outside of business has also put things like that in perspective. So I think I'm able to enjoy the success that I get better if I have somebody else to enjoy it with. But I'm not sure. These are very deep questions.
That's what Genius Leadership is about.
Yeah.
If the guests allow going.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that this having life outside of business for yourself and celebrating your milestones, focusing on your building relationships with your family, makes you less ambitious as the business owner and founder?
I'm not sure. It's one of those things that I've been debating with myself, because at the moment I'm working, maybe 8 or 9 hours a day on my business. In the past, that was more like 12 or 14 hours a day. But at the same time, I'm older now and I'm able to get more out of my time. So I might be able to achieve as much now in those 8 hours as I did in 12 before. But I'm always kind of curious, would I be able to achieve more if I was just by myself? Maybe, but maybe I would just have another burnout and, end up in another mental breakdown eventually. I'm not sure. It's just one of those things that I haven't kind of figured out yet. But I know that I want to achieve success in business, but I also want to achieve success in my personal life. And I think you have to, it's a little bit of give and take. So I think me being focused on building a business often takes a little bit out of my time or focus on the family. And me having a family also takes a little bit of focus or energy from the business. But at the same time, that's how I decided I wanted to kind of do this. And I think it's up to each and everyone to decide how they want to live their lives. And that comes back to the things that I was talking about earlier. You have to know who you are and what you want to get out of life. And not running a business is not for everybody. Having a family is not for everybody. You just have to figure out what you want to be in and how you want to live your life. There's no one right answer to this.
You mentioned that you, in the beginning of the interview, that maybe your starting businesses early on was related to your dad passing away, that you are trying to prove yourself to him.
But it was one of the reasons. Obviously, I also enjoyed what I was doing, and I've always enjoyed challenges and stuff like that. But it was just one of those things that at least I realized later on was one of the key factors, even though I didn't realize it at the time.
Are you still trying to prove yourself to anyone?
Probably, yes. If I'm completely honest, I probably am. But I remember, go back to my psychiatrist when we were talking about this, is that he asked me when we had kind of realized this, and he asked me when I was going through a really difficult period, and I was basically feeling a lot of pain and just feeling tortured by what I was doing. And he asked me, do you really think that your dad would want you to be suffering like this? Like, is this really what you think he would want for you? And it just, I think it was a good question. It made me kind of think about it from a different perspective. Maybe it wasn't a matter of proving myself. Maybe it was just a matter of doing something that would make him, or I'm guessing he would want me to be happy. That's what he would want. So maybe I don't necessarily have to prove anything. I just have to be happy.
It took you 3 years to get back to some baseline or to get back to who you used to be, as you said. And you still started building businesses, or like you continued with that. Have you contemplated going to employment, or was it never on the map?
Yeah, I did it. I did it after, while I was in this process of kind of recovery. I decided to get a regular job. This was also the same time I was expecting my first kid. So I decided to do the safe thing and get a safe job. And I worked for an IT company here in Iceland. And it was a wonderful experience trying that out after having been self-employed for a while. But it was really difficult for me to adapt to that, because I was used to a very fast-paced world where everything happens very fast and I can kind of just implement everything. And I went into an environment that everything was happening much slower. And I remember I stopped drinking coffee, and I started used meditation to just kind of be able to calm down, to kind of get to the level that the other employees were at. I was used to working much faster. So it was quite interesting. And then it was interesting that, 2.5 years later, when COVID hit, I lost my safe job. And it was my entrepreneurial experience that kind of helped me land on my feet. Yeah, no, I guess that's the only time that I've had like a regular job in the past 20 plus years. And it was a wonderful experience. I learned a lot, but it really wasn't me. Like, it was not the best version of me. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, she mentioned to me, you're not happy. Like, she looked at me and you're miserable in your job. And I was like, well, it wasn't me. And I feel like when I'm building something up, when I'm, doing my own thing, I feel like that's more like the good version of me. Like that's where my talents are the best. But it was really difficult going back into this after the mental breakdown. And literally during those, at least those 3 years period where I was kind of recovering from that, I really didn't think that I would ever kind of go into my own business again. Like, I thought that was just, I was done with that. But somehow I ended up back here again in building up a startup, which is one of the craziest things you can do. So I guess, I can't help myself.
How is it going now with the journey for you personally?
Oh, it's a lot of ups and downs. I kind of enjoy it mostly. I do enjoy myself when I have a big challenge, and building a startup is by all means a challenge, because if you it's interesting if you look at there's a lot of different types of businesses, and there is this kind of scale where you have businesses that are quite simple and secure and are kind of somewhat likely to succeed, and then on the other side of the scale are basically startups. And the statistics says that it's more than a 90% chance that it's going to fail. So I'm trying to build something up that has more than a 90% chance of failing, and I have to put all my energy into that. So it's a little bit of a weird position to be in, and I think it's healthy to be conscious about that it's going to be likely that it's going to fail. I'm definitely going to do everything that I can to avoid that and make it successful. But we've gone through pivots and iterations to the idea. I mean, it's I've been working on this business now for about 2.5 years, and we've done 3 big pivots during that period where we had to kind of change everything up. And that is often part of the process for startups. But at the same time, it's super difficult to do. Even though I knew that doing a pivot would be part of this, I would probably have to pivot at some point, and I knew the stories that was quite common. But when I actually went through the process, it was quite kind of soul-wrenching, or I don't know what the word is, but it was it kind of, I went through existential crisis or something during that period where I kind of just had to rethink everything in my life and make sure that I was doing the right thing. And I think that's quite common for startup founders, is that, it's super difficult to put all of your effort into building something up, and then you find out that it's it's just not enough. It doesn't work out, and you have to do something different. But that's part of the process.
How do you deal with that? Like when you are in that wave being tumbled, and intellectually that it's part of the process, but emotions are still there.
Yeah.
Are there any phrases, any activities that help you take the next step, get a bit further in this wave to get through?
So I find that when it comes to the mental side, I find that it's always a matter of being like proactive. It's difficult to react to something while you're in it. But if you have up to that point been exercising, if you have been meditating, if you have been taking good care of yourself and doing all these things while the situation is still good, or if you've been doing that up to that point, then it's more easier to react to these kind of situations. It's not one of those things when you get the mental burnout or whatever it is you go through, or you have a difficult situation and stuff. That's not the point in time where you're supposed to start meditating or start exercising. You have to start doing that before that, and that gives you the strength to hopefully be able to go through these difficult times. And even though I don't meditate as often now, or I don't exercise, always 3 times a week or whatever, I still have the basis. I still have been working on these things on and off again for the last few years. So it has given me a little bit of strength to be able to handle all this. But what I always, for example, what I do during my pivots is that I try to take a step backwards, or try to detach myself a little bit, maybe for a day or two from the problem, do something else, and then I can get back to it a little bit more refreshed and kind of have a clearer mind.
So when you do something else for that 1 or 2 days, is it something still in the business? You just...
Well, no, I try to break from the business.
Okay,
so I might go up to my cottage, or I might, meet up with friends, have a few drinks or something, just do something that has nothing to do with business.
And then whenever the thoughts come up about the business, do you let them be there and bubble in your head? Or you're like, okay, pause this until 2 days from now? What is the process there when you catch yourself?
It depends on where I am, how strong I am emotionally or mentally. Because if I've been taking good care of myself and I'm in a good place, it's easier to turn off those thoughts. But if I'm in a bad place where I've been under a lot of stress for a very long time and everything's, terrible, then it's really difficult to turn those thoughts off. Mm-hmm. So, this work is so much more about proactive work, being ready when that happens. But if you're in a bad place and you go through these things, it's really difficult to detach. And obviously I will try, but it's not always possible. So, yeah, difficult to answer, but yeah.
Yeah, you did answer. But I'm also curious about that you speak so much about it. So you mentioned last year when we met that when you go and talk about entrepreneurial journey, about your founder journey, you always make a point of mentioning. It's never the main topic of whatever you're talking about, but you're making a point of actually mentioning it. Why is that important for you to do that?
So I think it's very important to talk about these things because I think it's good for people that decide to become entrepreneurs, that decide to start their own business, to be aware that mental illness is, I would say, just part of the process. Some people are lucky and might not experience it, but for most people, it's part of the process. And by talking about it, I normalize it. And I also, for example, if I would have known how common this is when I myself went through this, I wouldn't have been as hard on myself. Mm-hmm. I would have been able to give myself a little bit of a leeway, allowed myself to take some time to kind of recover from this. And I would have known that it's part of the process. But I thought I was the only one. And I was so hard on myself, and I was not going to become a loser. I was not going to be the only one that couldn't handle the pressure. And I was trying to, So I want to talk about this to normalize it, to make people know that if they're experiencing it, it's fine. It's part of the process. Don't be hard on yourself. Just give yourself a little bit of a break and kind of recover from this, and then you can continue the journey. So that's why I talk about it, because I don't want other people to have to go through the same experience I did.
What can we as a startup ecosystem, as the society as a whole, do to make the entrepreneurial journey better?
I think it's always going to be a roller coaster ride. I don't think we can make the journey itself better, but we can help people understand what the journey is about. So just by helping people realize that it's not all fun and games, that it is difficult, it's a very isolating process. You go through a lot of difficulties, you have a lot of obstacles, you have a lot of moments where you feel like you want to give up. And I think just by talking about it and helping people realize that is the process, I think it will help them be able to handle the difficulties when they do arise. So
it's really about the awareness and really being more open about it.
I think so, because it is it can be such a difficult journey, and it is for most founders I know. And I don't think we can necessarily make it much easier, but we can try to help people be aware of what difficulties are ahead. And that way they can hopefully prepare themselves a little bit better for them.
You mentioned the isolation of the journey, that it's part of it as well. I've been working on my business for 4.5 years now, and I feel it. Like I'm an introverted extrovert, so I do need people around me, and I actually am feeling that it's tiring for me, taking energy, and I'm out of zone of my genius when I'm sitting in front of the computer a lot of time, building the brand, doing the sales conversations, trying to build something from scratch. How are you dealing with that?
So I actually perceive myself as being more of an introvert than an extrovert. I kind of don't mind spending a lot of time with myself, but I still feel very isolated. And I found that it doesn't matter if you're a solo founder, like you're the only owner of the business, or you have co-founders with you, you still feel isolated. So even if you have people with you in the company because you're focusing on different things and whatever, you still feel isolated. It's kind of funny. I used to call it my 911 group. It was like I would find a group of like-minded people, entrepreneurs, that I would always be able to call if I needed to talk about something. And I would call the 911 because often when everything is terrible and you go through difficult things, you need somebody to help you out. And often it just involves just somebody listening to your problem and understanding what you're going through, and it just makes it better. So I try to have a few people that I know that I can reach out to and talk to, but I also just try to be active in going to events and try to be part of the community and taking part. And I spend a lot of time mentoring and helping younger entrepreneurs. I really enjoy that. It also gives me good perspective on what I'm doing and kind of keeps me grounded. So I think helping others and kind of being part of a community is something that helps you kind of handle the isolation a bit better.
I love the idea of now 911 group.
Yeah, and it's the same with whether that being mental difficulties or just you might have got like a lawyer contact you because of something, or whatever it is. Because when you're running a business, you get into so many difficult situations. And sometimes you just need somebody to listen to what you're going through. And you can't always share that with your better half at home. Like my wife, I wouldn't share everything that I go through with her, because that would just put pressure on my situation at home. So I try to find other people, and also she might not be able to understand everything that I'm going through. So I try to find people that understand what I'm going through and that I can reach out to and support them. And I try to do the same for them as well. And I think also, at least in my case, I think now that I've been doing this for as long, most problems don't seem quite as big as they did in the beginning. But at the same time, I have more people now that I can reach out to and that understand me. And when I was starting up, I didn't know anybody who had ever started a business before. It was super difficult to start a business when you don't know anybody who's done it. Now I know, hundreds of people that have been building businesses and startups. So it's easier for me now.
I guess perspective also comes with the mentoring, as you said, that it also helps to keep the scale right of when the problems arise, that you're not really zooming in on them and feeling like they are huge, because you know it's part of the journey, you've been there before, and mentoring people who are earlier on the journey than you, it really helps you to keep that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just that, especially early on, but actually I think it's, for me at least, it's always true, is that I still put so much passion into whatever I'm building, and when something comes up, especially if something doesn't work or somebody's criticizing me or something, I do often take it a little bit personally, So it's good to be able at least to be able to share that with somebody else. Just know them that somebody else knowing that you're feeling bad or something might just make you feel better. It's a weird thing, but I guess
we are social beings, and that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I want to, we discussed a lot of the challenges, the tough parts of being an entrepreneur and a founder. I want to wrap up with the positive sides. So first of all, you have your 911 group, or maybe it's different groups throughout your different phases of entrepreneurial journey. Do you have some kind of celebration group? Do you share wins and progress with anyone?
I do that with my wife.
So that you bring home.
Yeah, that I bring home the good things. No, but that's actually one of the things that I have not been good enough at doing in the past, is celebrating. And I'm aware of that. And I'm trying to find ways of celebrating more now. So if something good happens in the business, I might invite my employees out for dinner or something to celebrate, or doing something fun together. Or I might just invite my wife out and celebrate with her if it's something more related just to me, or something like that. So I think celebrating is important, and it's something that I should, and I'm working on trying to be better at.
I actually work with my clients on that and helping them to bring the celebration into the journey. And quite often I see that people are thinking, okay, I've reached this milestone, I need to do something grand, take a vacation and go somewhere on a trip. And I'm saying you can do the same thing that is already on your calendar, just bring the intention of celebration into it. So it could be the weekly date with your partner. You just make it a celebratory one.
Yeah.
And just really bringing that vibe of like, yes, I made it, I got it, I got there, and so on and so forth, into whatever you're doing. And it could be the thing that is your daily practice of meditation. Just bring that celebration into your meditation on that day. I think we're overcomplicating that.
That's a good point. It's a really good point. But but it's also, it's one of those things that when you're in business, you just go through so many ups and downs that you kind of become a little bit numb to them. And it's also funny, for example, we did a funding round last year. So we got some money from investors that invested in our company, and it was awesome. But it was such a long process from when it started until it ended. And it's difficult sometimes to figure out when to celebrate, because it's not always just one day where you sign up the contracts and everything's done and you can celebrate. It's a very long process, and usually at the end of it, it's you've known for months that it's about to happen, so you really don't feel like celebrating then, and it's so it fades out. And I think often a lot of things are that way. So maybe intentionally we should also just once a month, or a couple of times a year, we should just take time to celebrate everything that has been going on in the past. I don't know, something like that.
I actually had this conversation with one of the clients recently who was like, my colleague is coming back from vacation and I feel like I haven't done enough to but communicate to that person, and so on and so forth. And I was like, okay, write down everything that you have done while that person was away. And her reply was like, whoa, I've done a lot. So I think having a regular celebration is a good thing.
Yeah.
And also, I clearly remember a moment when I was listening to a podcast on a walk. I remember when I was walking, and it was someone sharing about their infertility journey.
Mm-hmm.
And this conversation of like, do I celebrate the milestone of, okay, the egg actually, like it worked with the implant, with the IVF and so on and so forth. And she said, at some point I decided for myself, I'll celebrate every tiny thing because I don't know, like the next step, success of it is not given.
Yeah.
And I want to celebrate that I at least have gotten that far in this journey.
Yeah.
I've gotten this chance of looking forward to having a baby.
Yeah.
And I think we can do the same in the business.
Yeah.
And everywhere in life, we can just celebrate that we got to this point.
Yeah.
Where we haven't been previously, or we have gotten there again, and maybe it was a bit easier this time because we've learned from the previous experience. I think again we're making it more complicated, and I think that it should be like one point, but it can be.
That's actually a really good way of looking at it. I think it's also just, at least for me in the past, I've been so hard on myself and so demanding that often I haven't wanted to celebrate the small wins because I feel like I should be, doing something more bigger or something like that. So, and that's starting to change in me, and I think it's a good idea to celebrate every small win.
So let's wrap up on that, Haukur. What can you celebrate now? We're at the end of June when recordings, or no, I mean mid-June, 2/3 through. So maybe take May and June. What can you celebrate there?
I think there's a lot of stuff that I can celebrate, and I think I also can celebrate the fact that I get the chance to work with great people, and I think that's probably one of the biggest luxuries of my situation is that I work with people that I respect and admire, and I think that's something to celebrate.
Anything else?
A lot of things, yeah.
Give me 5. Let's challenge. Let's start wiring that habit. Make thicker neural connections there.
Okay. The fact that I'm still doing what I enjoy doing, the fact that I have good health, both physical and mental, the fact that I have a good family, the fact that, I recently bought my dream house, the fact that I get to work with awesome people, the fact that, I still have that passion, even though everything that I've gone through. And by the way, I think we touched on a few things today, but, I've gone through, economic crisis where I lost everything that I had. I've gone through, I basically ended up in bankruptcy. I've built up companies that didn't work, but, I've gone through all these things. I've gone through the mental breakdown and everything, but I still have the passion for what I do. And I think that is something that I'm very grateful for.
That's a big thing to celebrate.
Yeah, I think so.
Every day. Haukur, thank you so much for opening up, for letting me go that deep in our conversation. Yeah. Not every guest is ready to do that, so I really, really appreciate that. And I'm sure that Genius leaders have enjoyed it, and this conversation and your answers, your honesty, have given them permission to maybe feel their feelings, to accept things that they're going through, to really understand that they're not alone. And I hope that will be the trigger for them to reach out to someone to talk about that, or just allow themselves to sit with that part of their journey.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
And to you, Genius leaders, I want to remind you, as always, that I see you, I feel you, I love you. And I do believe that you can find your way to keep that passion going, no matter the ups and downs. So do that. Use the tips from Haukur today to really implement them in your life and go through those ups and downs in a healthy way. Love you. Take care. Talk to you next week.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Genius Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, hit the subscribe button. Please rate, review, and share to help more people discover the show and become the better leaders. For more conversations about living in your zone of genius, connect with me on LinkedIn. Genius Leadership is an honest conversation about leading yourself and others, and it is my honor to be a guide in overcoming everything.